Welcome to the Poetry Project. Happy Friday. Thank you all for coming to tonight's event celebrating the fatally excellent poets Serena Chopra and Luiza Flynn-Goodlett here at the Poetry Project. My name is Andrea Abby Karam, and I'm the Communications and Development Coordinator here at the project. I ask you to bear with us if there's any technical difficulties, and would like to remind everyone that we are recording this event, and please feel free to keep your camera on or off as you prefer. I'll also note that to access a live transcript of tonight's event, click the live red indicator in the upper left corner of the screen, and then click View Stream. And the live transcript will open in a new browser for you to see. One of our moderators for tonight, Anna Kreinberg, is adding a PDF to the chat now that includes some more tips and directions for Zoom. If you have any trouble using Zoom during tonight's event or any Zoom questions, please feel free to chat Anna directly. Anna is now also adding our statement of safer spaces to the chat. The Poetry Project's commitment to safer spaces does not change according to whether the space we share is physical or virtual, distal or proximal, and we extend appreciation to you for joining us in this commitment in this community. I want to thank the Poetry Project staff who are making this event possible, including James Barrickman, Anna Kreinberg, and Nicole Wallace. I think of the event space as a decolonial pathway that points to potential for the return of stolen land to the indigenous people that the state violently stole it from in the first place. In the context of occupied Lenape-Hoking, where I'm speaking from, I'm thinking specifically about the unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape, Canarsie, Shinnecock, and Munsee peoples. Anna is putting this map in the chat not to endorse it as complete, but to invite you to learn continually about the land you occupy, its history, and its ties. And with this foundation of optimism of the event space as a pathway towards decolonization, I am thrilled to introduce tonight's program celebrating Serena Chopra and Luiza Flynn-Goodlett. When we think of the work of queer community and movement building, we think of the poetry and performances of them both, their contours, criticisms, sublime joy, and devastating shifts. First, we'll hear from Luiza Flynn-Goodlett, followed by Serena Chopra. Luiza Flynn-Goodlett's debut, Look Alive, wraps tightly around the heart of the reader with strands of hair, surgical sutures, and Ziploc plastic as a sublime catalog of the matriarchal figures of family and teachers that she's lost. Illuminated by visual beauty and flickers of pleasure, the speaker manages to bury many, yet still feel the sun dazzle her skin. Quote, "Summers we bleach hair with lemon, are warm as gold on skin, haven't glimpsed the shapes will be hammered in." Look Alive traverses chapters of childhood, teen trysts, and independent queer adulthood with reflection and appreciation about where she came from and those who taught her, as well as sharp resistance to overt and covert racism and misogyny that tends to define Southern whiteness. These connections are intimate and adversarial. Quote, "I came out teeth first, took an apron string in my mouth, stirred what was caramelizing so she could tend to dough." In this image, I am reminded of how hyenas, an exclusively matrilineal society, are born with teeth fully formed and battle their sisters to the death to become the queen. In Look Alive, this anthropomorphic paralleled foil embraces the teeth yet rejects the hyper-hierarchical. Look Alive also offers a breath of fresh subaltern air while reading during the pandemic as it revivifies queer cruising up against these halted temporary encounters of abandon. Quote, "You're right, we have at least one pair of cuffs, varieties of lube, and get lonely, can be found against bathroom walls between ringlets of graffiti. Flynn-Goodlett grants us the immediacy of body, in relation to family, in relation and resistance to state, and composed of unapologetic queerness. On the threshold of death, the speaker's many Southern matriarchs gaze through Southern screen doors, and while she falls back into the ecstasy of being pushed hard up against the graffitied bathroom wall, Flynn-Goodlett writes, 'This play ends in a dead president.'" Luiza Flynn-Goodlett is the author of Look Alive, a finalist for numerous prizes, including the National Poetry Series and winner of the 2019 Cal's Poetry Book Prize from Southeast Missouri State University Press, along with 6 chapbooks, most recently Shadowbox, winner of the 2019 Madhouse Press Editors Prize, and Tender Age. winner of the 2019 Headmistress Press Charlotte Mead Prize. Her poetry can be found in Tri-Quarterly, Third Coast, Pleiades, and elsewhere. She serves as editor-in-chief of Foglifter in sunny Oakland, California. Please join me in welcoming Luiza Flynn-Goodlett to the virtual stage.
Thank you so much for having me. I have always wanted to read at the Poetry Project, and I moved away from New York 10 years ago, and so I thought it might never happen. And I really appreciate Andrea and everyone at the project for having me. It really does mean a lot, and I'm so excited to read with Serena. She was one of our recent poetry guest editors at Foglifter, so I had the honor of reading alongside her and being in the editorial room. And I just really admire her intellect, and I think she's brilliant and kind, and I think her work is incredible. So thank you so much for having me. I'm going to read a lot of different things. I'm first going to read some poems from Look Alive. And then I'm going to read some poems from a newer chapbook, and then new work. So, all right. The sublime before is someone's after. Red-throated hummingbirds spar above the magnolia. Upwind, something grilled. The dogs are still alive. Yap at whitetail in the cornfields. The rooster hasn't chased us down the driveway, so no one got fed up, loaded the shotgun. Father's heart doesn't yet float on a pillow of fat. The miscarriage is years off. Summers, we bleach hair with lemon, are warm as gold on skin. Haven't glimpsed the shapes will be hammered in. Tell. In the end, his daughter stepped forward, nestled the apple in her braids. Just as Joan steadied a glass, stared down the barrel of Burroughs' gun. Women always handle snakes, not at the revival, but after. Heart rates lowered, adders twist wrists. That's how mother seared the flesh off her forearm. Didn't notice until the roast was repositioned. Why we just make sure that uncle isn't alone with the little ones. Of course we take up arms, carve into cellulite, inject wrinkles with poison, climb atop pyres like that other saintly Joan. As Cole will scratch down what we'd always meant to say. Against forgiveness. You're told it's honey, sweet on the tongue, a poultice for what in you hasn't stopped screaming. Perhaps. Others live through what you did, stand upright. He has likely forgotten too, conflated you with another pair of ruined tights, muddy saddle shoes. Then why insist on calling down this well that flings your voice back, distorted and faint? It's just that here, treading water, is the child you were, skin he unzipped you from. Soul visitor, you can't leave her where she was flung ages ago. She may find handholds and moss, climb skyward, or drown gagging, but you must sit, witness it. This poem is called I Survived, which is, it's based on a TV show of the same name. I survived. Never pick up hitchhikers. Help a man on crutches load his van. Heed gut feelings, or else mimic intimacy. Shield your skull. Play dead after the second shot. Take deep breaths before being forced underwater. Hands hacked off to delay ID. Scale the embankment. Flag a passing car. Tell everyone. Just loved ones. Or no one, since you hydroplaned over it. Don't recall a thing. Or do, but only his fly popping undone. Sky searing blue beyond the trees. The taste of rope. No one wants to hear how time's gooey. Even now, if someone comes up from behind, walks a certain way, you fall back, can barely be reached. Faces haloed like streetlights in fog. And all the time, carry survival, necessary and half forgotten as tampons at the bottom of a purse, saying, you've bled, still bleed, live. To Miss Melton. Sorry, 1 second. To Miss Melton. What pricked most? My dyslexia, her mooning, our interrupted peck behind chessboards and dress-up box. Childhood sunflower seed cracked in your teeth, shards spat on pavement. I've met your fellow since. Love seat zipped in plastic, pristine cushions faded. A crisp cornered fraternity, memory fills like sails. Or airbags, the night she was hit by a drunk driver. It was instant, but you know how much an instant can contain. The closet door opens, floods 2 girls in light. History. While you never requested passage, your passport was stamped. Forceps delivered you into its environs. The shock sent lungs howling. Its current tugs, but is rarely noted. Father parts a cloud of DDT, runs after it. Mother exits the dank brownstone with an abortion. The South hawks, spits you across a continent. It's only clear from afar. This play ends in a dead president. The blitz begins with that siren. Still, white faces squinted up at lynched men. Among them, children still alive. And we neglect to ask what they saw, when they turned away, as if today is a raft floated on, not the wave dragging us under. The sublime before is someone's after. Both fathers grabbed them by the throat. One uncle, drunk, drove off a bridge. Her mother, pregnant 9 times, had 7 children. His was an icicle, chain smoking on the porch. Her pelvis, crushed under a semi, tilted the cervical cap, so the first of us was a happy accident. How remarkable then, the veil. Queen Anne's lace, deer-cut paths in the woods, periwinkles adorning creek beds, drawn over all that. We wear it still, stir delicate stitches with breath. So those were some poems from Look Alive. And now I'm gonna read from Tender Age, which won the Charlotte Mew Prize from Headmistress Press. I'm gonna read some poems from Tender Age, and also in this section are some poems from my second full-length collection, which I'm starting to send around. Confessional. Although Grandma made sure I saw the inside of a church once a year, there's no communion for the unbaptized, and certainly no sliding into the lacquered booth to whisper through a screen. But she can't stop me telling now how I slipped the cat's bowl through a crack in the door to avoid shit-caked fur, eyes yellow with death, shoved my brother down a slide, broke his arm, never held infant necks right. So cue absolution, my heavy plate shorn. A shadow shifts behind the screen. Is that you, Redeemer? Or still me? Ear cupped to my own voice, ready for the good word. Against the season. A magnolia purples after November's downpour. I know the feeling. Born jaundiced, ear infected, though mom refused the tubes. With her leaves all shed, the tree gleams. A girl turned to stone, livestock, bracingly cold spring, so she can't run. Understanding trails like a veil as I sprint down the hallway, cupping a handful of period blood, having transformed only into myself. This next poem is called Out of the Woods. It's tough to read. I really wanted to read it because I like it. It's tough to read because every other line is italicized. And I wanted to play with how trauma kind of can double time and kind of make time move like a tectonic plate over time. So anyway, I hope that it works to read Out of the Woods. I trip up the slope behind the swing set. I backflip off the waterfall. I curl under a teacher's desk as adults whisper in the hall. I burn leeches off my shin, laughing. Mother tosses my dress in a trash can, but red peeks out. Mutz knows the ridgeline. I read at recess, move into town. Pockets are jammy with berries for my secret thicket. Trees are tongues, fingers. My woods, a periwinkle in its shell. In some dreams, he's a step behind, gripping my neck. In others, I whip about, and he's a fawn or barn owl I'd spooked after stepping on a nail. Worst is paralysis as he balloons above. And what of my lost woods, or the pathless ones I now pace? When will I crest the hill, skirt hissing with leaves? Genealogy. Do you guys ever have it where you get really mad at someone and so you write a poem? The person I got mad at has no idea, but I really hate genealogy. Genealogy. I should say I hate genealogy and white people's obsession with genealogy. That's mostly it. We duck barbed wire, pocket arrowheads, dare each other into the kudzu choke shack, dark as a cave. This close to the Harpeth, our land must have been a plantation, and it home to sharecroppers, if not slaves. Witch house, we call it. Fear it more than graves spitting distance off the porch. Descendants of those upriver who owned people. Our fear then is a sort of half knowing, like the toddler who whispers, "Last time I was your mommy," that it's waiting for us to bow under the eaves. Step inside. To my mother's ex-husband. You're not the first to spring a girl from her family home with an ultimatum, followed by refusal at the courthouse to promise forever. Before my father, every man leaves bruises on her wrists. You're no exception. The poet who faults her penmanship, filing, large mouth laugh, declares there's room for one genius in this family while flicking ash onto the carpet. Now, tell me, her only daughter with coal black hair, like you, like her father, once you tracked her down, hugely pregnant in Asheville, did you really offer to take me off her hands? And just then, did I start kicking? Choosing a transitional object. Snip Hanson's from Teen Beat while debating Taylor versus Zach so passionately, a curl escapes its barrette, and your best friend tucks it behind an ear before it catches on lip gloss. Start a fight so she'll get picked up early, forgetting a lanyard on the den's yellow shag. Wander past beehives, quiet for winter, into the pasture where a hayloft gasps open. Bite nails bloody, telling yourself how stupid she is, the fence post kicked for emphasis. Eat slices of bread from the bag, then diary on knee, scribble page after page of not a lesbian before securing the lock, removing its toy key. Columbarium. I can't picture you in this book-shaped urn, labeled in a cursive you never mastered. It's behind glass, so even if still present, you couldn't hear me whisper, "Mara, your brother's back in rehab." It just doesn't seem possible. I'm here, eating, sleeping, fucking, while you're nowhere, hit by a drunk driver the spring of junior year. Mara, you bit my lip, didn't pretend to be practicing, though we never talked about it. So I rest a palm on the marble where, if we faced each other, your heart would be. Perseid season. First, a new barber finds a gap in my hairline from the fall. Not a scar exactly, just my skull holding its breath. Next, a burner left on. In its rotten cloud, I peer down the garbage disposal's throat, then bless summer for windows left open. Next, just underfoot, a lobster-sized crawfish lifts a claw, sidles under rocks. These nights, Earth wrecks asteroids on her fontanelle. She shatters time to light. And when her wife runs a thumb along its milky trail, turns to kiss her wrist. So I'm going to read some new poems, some of which I have never read. But I also want to say that I'm not reading anything from my two most recent chapbooks because they're projects, and I would have to read you the whole thing. So this one, Shadow Box, is about the abusive relationship I was in my early 20s, and there are ghosts and doppelgangers and serial killers and all that spooky shit to try to get at that. And then my most recent chapbook, most recent thing I've published, is The Undead. And this I wrote during this past year. And it's about finding love at the end of the world. And there are characters, some dykes and a dog, and they're trying to survive a zombie apocalypse. And then it's also about my relationship with my wife and how kind of seemed like things were going to get good, maybe. And then, you know, it's the end of the world. So anyway, if you want to read those, you can buy them. All right, so this is some new work. My grandmother's body. To me, wrinkled, buttoned to the throat, neat as curio shelves, with the miniature Eiffel Tower, thimbles, pins shaped like sheep. But this wasn't always so. Albums evidence another that held to light like stained glass. Asked my mother, "Don't you just find men repulsive?" And didn't laugh because it wasn't a joke. Cleaning out the condo, we unfold her from the back of a drawer. Surprisingly heavy, but silky as kid skin. She slips through our hands. Beefsteak begonia. And I've been in my house for a year, so all I have is my plants. To nourish your most clenched and delicate parts, you swing about in a moment that spans months. Then anything still in the dark shrivels, simply falls away until your whole clever self is lit. You may take me, these soiled rags piled on my back, for a snail. Hunched by the weight, I bow to your bloody tongues as they open one by one to speak. Not that again. From a meager deck, I draw the same 3 cards. Red dress, hair ribbon, muddy saddle shoes, lay the bloody offering at your feet like a cat. Shake your head, and I'll turn to cut flowers. But the stalks leak what we know as tears, tempt metaphor. So just forgive me and give me a new body. Set marble of mind inside. Strike any match you must. This is my last poem. I wrote it in January, and I'm sure you all know that sometimes you have to write yourself back into the world. Stay. Wanting to die isn't the same as no longer wanting to live. Stepping for a moment into the street. Yes, this isn't even your worst year, but you're of an age. Stones weigh pockets. So if you walk down to the river now, it will be calm as thumbing the final page and sliding your book back onto a shelf. It would only mean you've seen enough couples who, rather than treat their pit bull's infection, remove her eyes. Manatees carved with a president's name. Every surface in your city barbed to prevent rest. Being alive is not the same as wanting to live. Though even drought-stunted magnolia blush green this morning. Once, when very young, you're permitted to camp under one in the backyard. Unzip the tent to spring's white offerings. So, in your left pocket, stones, and in the right, flowers. Sink fists in them both. Stay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luiza, for reading. Anna, if you could drop a link for Look Alive again in the chat, that would be amazing. And I'm so excited to hear about your new work. I definitely want to get The Undead. And thank you so much for reading such a wide range from all of your amazing work. It's a real pleasure to get to host you tonight. And next up, we have Serena Chopra. I was fortunate enough that after inviting Serena to perform tonight, she was willing to share with me her work in progress manuscript, Dayawati of Mercy. Through a polyphony of lyric seductions across swaths of the speaker's ancestral and present homes of the Maharashtra Prairie and the American Great Plains, Chopra forges a subjectivity with the hunger and thirst of the ocean mixed with the velocity of a waterfall that skates across cracked earth. Quote, across the stage, a birth chart of weightless deviations, each body filling itself on a canon of lusting. Her canon of lusting continues throughout the text, hybridized across fragmentary lyrics and repetitious prose with family struggle, growing up brown in Texas, and complicity in the shifting and dehydration of the land around her. Quote, after my mother moved out, my father and I were known locally as the darkest family. I grew up along a dry riverbed on an ever-expanding construction site, playing house in unfinished homes. The intensity of hunger and thirst often overtake the expanding and constricting subjectivity into vigorous recycling of memory, some her own, some inherited. Chopra shows us that the terrain of trauma is akin to the plains poured over with concrete, lushness walled off and dormant until fracture becomes fault line. Quote, when awakened in a field, when abandoned with looking back, when awakened in a field, when the ball cracked at the bat. Chopra's haunting repetitions elucidate the intensely felt intergenerational violence and microviolence as the speaker struggles to contain it all. Chopra does not offer the reader easy tools for recovery from the vicious cocktail of bearing the scars of both inherited and lived trauma. Instead, the text produces a stretched and desiccated subjectivity that consumes and carries it all simultaneously. Quote, sites of injury where the failed heart blooms from the choke, home is where. This work asks, what are the contours of the limits of trauma? What shapes do the contours make along the edges of the scarred body, the fractured self? When land and memory is bulldozed over by capitalism and colonialism to create copycat suburban homes, where do we store our reserves of feeling and memory? What does the after image look like? Is it a mirror, or is it a surface we have yet to break through? Serena Chopra is a teacher, writer, dancer, filmmaker, and visual and performance artist. She has a PhD in creative writing from the University of Denver and was a Kundiman Fellow and a Fulbright Scholar. She has 2 books, This Human and Ick, as well as 2 films, Dagana Chapdi and Mother Ghosting. She was a featured artist in Harper's Bazaar, as well as in the Denver Westward's 100 Colorado Creatives. She has recent publications in Sync, Foglifter, Matters of Feminist Practice, and the anthology Alone Together, Love, Grief, and Comfort in the Time of COVID. In October 2020, Serena co-directed No Place to Go, an artist-made queer haunted house with Kate Spear and Frankie Tone, and has received a month-long artist residency at Understudy Denver for September 2021. Serena is an assistant professor of creative writing at Seattle University. Please join me in welcoming Serena to the stage.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Poetry Project, for organizing and having me here. And yeah, what a pleasure it is to read with Luisa, who I've worked with so intimately on an edition of Foglifter. Yeah, so much joy and kinship here. Yes, just one correction, I grew up in Colorado, and so all of that is taking place on the prairie in Colorado. No worries at all. But yes, that's important to what I'm going to be reading from today. So the manuscript I'm working on, Dayavati of Mercy, begins with my grandmother, who was married at 14 and was abused throughout her life. She lived in India, all over the country, and was abused by her mother-in-law and also my grandfather. And my father was witness to a lot of those violences and also was victim to many of those violences. And so the centerpiece of the book kind of discusses that. And then the final section examines what it's like to grow up with a parent who has that kind of trauma, particularly when that trauma is also reenacted or replayed in the home. So through my reading today, I'll take you through all of those terrains, but I'm going to open up with a film I made just 2 minutes long. I'm making a series of animations for the text, and so you'll hear one of the poems played over it. So I'm going to share my screen. And oops, I gotta stop. I gotta redo that. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Can everyone see this? Yes. Okay. And Andrea, will you give me a thumbs up if the sound is working too? Okay. Thanks.
Dayavati, full of mercy. Daya does not ignore the tragedies of the world. Daya confronts tragedy, uses one's means to drown suffering, offers breath, compassion, sympathy, kindness, mercy. Daya suffers an empathy with, having pity on, breathlessness, becomes herself breathless, suffers, suffering in the suffering of all others. Daya observes alien pain. Daya moves with affection toward the sufferer to act mercifully with kindness and forgiveness. Daya observes alien pain, ropes, fire, addiction, madness. Daya moves patiently, asthmatic, with affection, lactating, shoeless, breathless, toward the sufferer, begging, Daya, 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 to the river, to act mercifully, to drown this suffering with kindness and forgiveness, forging breath for giving, forgiving breath, breathlessly, rather than causing others death, one imbued with Daya, Daya chooses herself to die.
So that's a text or a film that talks about the etymology of Dayavati, which comes from a concept called Daya, which means mercy, forgiveness, and having kind of this ultimate sympathy with. And so the book kind of plays with the tension between mercy and the sort of being imbued with mercy and also undergoing trauma and abuse. In response to the trauma and abuse, my grandmother tried to commit suicide 3 times by drowning in a river. And the only other thing I think you need to know before I go into the sequence is that Malavi Devi is the name of my great-grandmother, who was one of the abusers of my grandmother, Dayavati. So now I'm just going to go into the sequence. Seduction after the Great Plains. Across the stage, a birth chart of weightless deviations, each body filling itself on a cannon of lusting. Constellate me, untense me, give me into the last resort sinew, bone at the cool glory of my sexy clarity. Stop motion as a strobe lit prairie. Watch me in the mirrors. Lightning. Water is furious conjunction. I arch sternum and spread leg. Know better than to keep dearly in the empty pockets of pussy commodity. I take copper under my tongue, wade the pool, channel the night shift through an electric campus of roving mothers, meaning under the stench of men and cigarettes, I am foul-mouthed blood, a whole world laid with shaved pearl. So when I dance, you read what you can see. My eyes turned beneath heaving light caught rhinestone on lashes is a spin, a swerve, a veil. I am not here with you or for me. Like jaw-clenched knots in my throat, I cut this circulation of barter and tend. I bring tender, I do better. I lick the wound and enter, letting the tongue split and wander there. Dayavati had haunted here before, claiming every emptiness like prairie solemn in the thick nerves of ghost town. That haggling between weather source, structure, and collapse. Is it wind or abandon? Dayavati had haunted here before, Between myself and my skin, she haunted here, my arrival, after so many deaths attempted, swallowed, saved for. My arrival because depletion, an eroding, rolling debt. I had to be Encataneous, and she between the fat of never-ending light is not heat, is not demanding life. One never knows how fully proximal they are to pain, began the story of many lives, our own. Not to rewrite you, but to collect you in, every sound a hemorrhaging. The world falls away from us like meat from the bone, as they say of good meat on blackened bone, as they say of widows on the pyre, your mother on the father in the fire that made you. Mercy, Daya, don't be afraid of our lies. It's the wounding cannot hold stable a truth. That I am anger, you. Are you hunger, that broken flower pot still begging for water? A season in smoke and ice in the sunlight of suffering some sort of comfort. That medicine, that clearing me, that beast of great sequence, where I call myself out to the night and morning already pruning herself into waking, escapist nature, suffering some sort of ordinary constellations, originate shapes, fingers kneeling against teeth, flora heaving strange inspiration in a vase, possesses humans, all which flaws, folding hands, lips, suffering teeth. I may be the golden decay in you, the water, in which leans rootless our favorite bouquet. In 1934, Dayavati turned 14 and was wed to Anand Sagar Chopra. To have one's name and to have it taken. Sas means mother-in-law. Dahej means dowry. Rasi means rope. For example, Dahej rasi ke tara bandhata hai. Dowry binds like rope. Or Sasni rasi se Dayavati komara. Mother-in-law hit Dayavati with rope. Or Ne rasi se Dayavati. Mercy for the rope. Alien pain moves toward the knot breaking, the drum, deafness, the laws of the mothers of sons procuring daughters to take one's name. Malavi Devi and Dayavati Chopra, Mary Dadi, my grandmothers, mothers of fathers and of fathers of fathers, as they say, who ties the knot keeps the firstborn son. My great-grandmother also took my grandmother's firstborn son from her. So that's in reference to that. I open you in my hand on the floor and I'm counting with you the retreating steps, the sweetness of burnt onion, garlic on fingertips to remind you your agility with a blade, with slick skin. The knotted rope against your ears, your deafness, the inexplicable diagnosis of mine, our legs braided with muscle bend like baskets, the intimacy of resting on your own strength, the love you whisper between your breasts. I must believe these were your rituals too. I must believe the silence left you, no forgiveness, and the tinnitus in my ears is the strain of your crisis, swallowed and packed neatly in your jaws. By 1944, Dayavati had lost 3 children. In the first, a miscarriage, take copper under the tongue, wade the pool, channel night through an electric campus of roving mothers. In the second, Malavi Devi persuaded her son that a woman must be disciplined to be depleted of her sorrows, thick nerves of ghost town. In the second, Daya spilled milk she pulled from the cow and was lashed, took slim rest and was lashed, made tea and was lashed. Constellate, untense, give into the last resort, sinew. In the second, she fled barefoot by foot and trained to her father for protection and shelter. In the second, Daya hovered in the threshold of her childhood home, her father reminding her a girl is property and she was not his any longer. Chopraji and his mother could do with her as they wished, he said. If they so desire, they can make their shoes out of your leather. Arch sternum and spread leg, a blade, your slick skin. From the threshold of her childhood home, she took by foot and train to the river. She took 2 wrong trains and was lost for days. The world falls away like meat from the bone. In the second, witnesses reported her tattered, lactating, haunting the stations, shoeless as a beggar. In the second, she took by foot and train to the river. In the second, who pulled her from the river? Jaw clenched, knotted throat, a stolen state of calm. In the second, Daya's breasts, flooded with river, only fed the child desperate water. In the second, it was only a daughter, emaciated leather. Watch me in the mirror. In the third, it was relayed to Daya that Malavi Devi would be raising the child on her own. Lightning, water is furious conjunction. In the third, it was confirmed best for the child to be taken from the mother directly after depletion of breast milk, that haggling between weather source structure and collapse. It was spoken that there could be visits when the child grew older. Lick the wound and enter. In the third, Daya dreamed of a bridge impossibly rivered, foul-mouthed blood, a whole world laid with shaved pearl. In the third, a great pain of purling water broke upon a pearled sun, the tongue split and wandering. In the third, a pearled sun was pulled from her still wet breast. In the third, she pulled herself. In the third, she pulled from herself as she pulled from the cow, a great pain, her breast of hardened pearl, the lag lines of an evaporated spill. What does mercy forge? The debts are locally known. Obedience consumes the nerves, alive with afterimage. Unearth what survives survival. The body ingrown with what conditions, castrations. One good ear needing the other's silence. The prairie hands me a love for time under vacancy. Darkness caught in the seam between her lips. I dance the night into shifts of rivulets, wrinkled desert wind. Daya, relay the ways nerve dries into bone. Where disorder is something disappearing you from the inside. Slow black happiness, keenest fossil of her gesturing heat. her final thirst, throttles my leaky expenses. Men come from, for their mothers and go. I take a fistful of pomegranate to the mouth. The poem is a stage on which the wound swerves. Watch, the edge is on fire, and I burn only to survive it. Seduction after nocturnal prey. Flat, flat land, dust in our eyes, staring at the lust of the mountains, Western interrogation of our flatness, staring at the sun, staring at the black leaning against our windows. To make inside that blackness $1 million, a woman of cosmopolitan seduction to whom I give my girlhood nickname and leave red kiss on the threat of night. And to myself, a stolen state of calm, the icy purple lips of a too early crocus. I always begin the moon in each spiral. I know that leaning here as I am in the lap of a lap dance, I withstand a lineage, suffer some sort of guilty comfort. Is it labor turns a girl into woman? Is it the thought of distant seasons? I first knew of broke women with yet another dead engine before I knew what it meant for her kept in perpetual dowry. Does this violence embarrass you? Excess is a shadow suffered when what wins over the eye like velvet instigation, the cool night tripping over crickets, but we were still the immigrants who made it. Quiet homes, fences. When coming home at 4 a.m. to a dead bird in the kitchen, blood like a snapped seam of sequins, feathers, and the cat already sleeping. Guilt, what nest have you made in my throat, feeding from the winter keep of my heart? Our cells like embers. There is a ghost muscle that is water. There is her rage there, the challenge of lifting her to our lips, of letting her act upon our cells. What is trust? What are the lag lines of an evaporated spill? What kind of map of absence of accident when the bruise refuses to show? Where the fist kiss, oh, bring me the contemplation of cells shocked, the halt in the ripening of senses. To know each hair stitched to your skull, to collect those fallen into a bun, to pin where your spine insists your head to buoy, despite the sinking to drain your sight of. Invasive species. Father pulls at the prairie, tearing her at her roots. I help, but not out of his weedy frustration. I collect her in vases, fanning her neatly in our windows, prairie staged for prairie witness. Read her reflection in the window like a palm. She whispers, the depletion spreading like moonlight, her ghost submerged beneath our lawn. Father shows me how to spade and pull from the root, but her breezy flowers, fiery grass, fine grains swell in the earth, tuber thick, muscling root leathers in clay, and clay is a firm fist. And anyway, prairie roots crowd angry in vases, gripping their clay fists, claiming the water metallic, rusting with grief and mute as blood. Between her and hers is a word on the tip of my tongue, of blemish, of guilt, of fault, an extended break in the body, the lawn-ironed horizon of extinction, of cutaneous erosion. The grasses stilled in their ghosts. I cut the roots. Father cautions me against discarding them in our flower beds. Invasive species are insistent. Invases the prairie smells of drowned air. Calcifies the glass, rots overnight and insists we scry the effluvium for our morning prayer. Withered stamen, balding ovaries, how do her petals withstand fists of storm and wind? I remove the death and change the water, unable to discern her kind of thirsting. And the final piece I'm going to read for you tonight is an excerpt from a longer lyrical essay that parallels my father caretaking for his father, who, abused him and his mother, and also parallels that with me caretaking for my father when he had a heart attack, which he recovered from. But parallels the two and questions what is mercy, and kind of the distance around that when it comes to trauma. This piece is called G, a catalog of future mercies. What fueled us the most, Father? What trespasses impressed on each other's suffering? We unfurl our love from ancient angers. We sit in the living room, silent as the tea cooling in unstuttered smoke. The metal fruit basket glints from the edge off of which I slammed it, soft apples to the floor. I understand why you love my sister best. Of anyone, I understand you best. G is a moniker of respect used as a suffix, as in Dadi Ji, beloved grandmother, or Pita Ji, honorable father. As a noun, G translates to heart, soul, wish, love in the subjunctive, and recognition of future mercies. Your father, Mary Dadaji, my grandfather, lived alone in Delhi after Dadiji died. He was drinking and in pain. Nearly all of the money had been gambled and spent, and he had scared the servants away. A doctor came to visit him. The diagnosis was dire. In-home surgery as soon as possible would be required. You pleaded with him to come to America for the operation, but grandfather loved India only. Growing up, I was secretly, or maybe not so secretly, obsessed with India. I mostly imagined into its mystique and asked few questions. From early on, you made it clear that you would tell me the information I needed to know, sparing me the complex uneasiness of our situation. You didn't, for example, tell me when you went back to India to remarry. Devastated, I found the pictures a year later, tucked in a drawer. I was jealous of everyone in attendance, but mostly of the little girl, my age, leaning gently in bindi and bangles, who was now my cousin, leaning sweetly into my stepmother, such well-behaved daughters. I was always snooping, elaborating foreign objects into personal narrative. The artifacts in our home allured me. Brass vases, stone statues, the erotic twists of tapestry, small warped records slipped from covers with bombastic Devanagari script above dark yearning eyes, the scent of sandalwood beaded into my lenga, an illustrated portrait of Sai Baba that I believed and boasted to friends was of my grandfather. Mary Dadaji. Humbly, I lowered my eyes. When he was manic, your father wore red. You recall his outrageous costumes, father, especially at school lunchtime. He'd show up doing stupid things, being funny. You lower your eyes in memory of your drunk father throwing money, everyone jumping for coin and laughing. What has trespassed, father? Who are the citizens of memory? When he was depressed, he wore only white kurta. Late into the night, he played records on the gramophone, full volume, fuller and fuller, in awe of the telephone, of one sublime sound defining the moment here and elsewhere. He rang his older sister in Nagpur and held the phone in the sound horn, sending Lata's ethereal truths trembling across phone lines. Trembling incoherent distances, trembling incoherent but true. You recall your mother crying, you begging your father to sleep, the servants awakened, watching, waiting, some covering their mouths, laughing. When he woke post-surgery from the anesthesia, Dadaji was immobilized by a plaster cast, entombing him from the hips down over his feet, and his apartment had been completely emptied. Everything except an unreachable cup of water on a crate next to the bed had been stolen. The doctor had left Dadaji for dead. For days, father, you tried to reach him, from America, and for days, a trembling unknowing. For days, the operator reported the requested line, dead. It is said that mercy is like forgiveness. What is the distance of resemblance? And in this distance, mercy. Pity, thanks, or reward? What occasions gratitude? What reward? What in the debt of this distance is there to forgive? I tug on the heart of difference. I plead. It wasn't until my late 20s when, in response to a demand for an apology, you raged one loose. You think my father ever apologized to me, you spat? Parents don't apologize to children. He tried to kill us. Do you think he ever apologized to children? I'm sorry, is that what you want me to say? I'm sorry? There are two demands I had never heard you make. I love you, and I'm sorry. I accepted your question as a confession to both, as a commanding of their resemblance. With your sisters also in America, you reached out to your estranged older brother, the stolen son, who lived an hour's flight from Delhi and traveled there frequently on business. But wanting nothing to do with the family, he refused your plea to check on Dadaji. For days, no one came to Dadaji, lying in his bed, starving, dehydrated, pained in the apartment, swelling with the stench of damp, suffocating skin. I know well the soft couch of your palm. I have seen it many times lifted in pledged threat. But only once have I opened its pious heat and pressed there a prayer for recovery, for you to wake with repaired heart, stinted artery. Oh, mercy, mercy, the trying blood of my father. What fueled us the most was shame, bits of failed construction, Is there a karma to rust? Honorable future heart, what is it to ration you mercies from the winter keep of one's heart, when already our souls wither on their debts? Finally, Father, you reached an old friend who sent his uncle in Delhi to Dadaji's apartment. The uncle found your father like death, his white kurta stained with urine leaking through the cast, not softening it. He phoned. The smell was like death. He suggested, take mercy on the resemblance. You tug on the heart of difference and leave for India on the next available flight. What in the debt of this distance to forgive? The trembling 30-hour journey to reach him before. The hours trembling with a decade earlier when you arrived, but your mother had already been given to the river. When you woke from your 4-day coma, you could speak only in Hindi. Common, the nurse explained, the brain fired up with its earliest memories. In these now, you were a terrified child. Your body curled and cringed like kindle at the flame. How small, how harmed you felt. In the dark, you pleaded with me. Was I your mother? In the dark, you screamed you beheld a giant taller than your father. Lost in tubes and sheets, you tried to burrow. You pulled everything up over your head, and for the first time, I beheld your member. Sacred child, my origin, my tender father, I wept with your fear. I knew a great distance had been shattered. Your legs, thin like mine, shivered. I pulled a blanket over you, feet to hips, and told you you were all right. We were all right, in recovery, and how dare fear try and tremble here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Serena, for your generosity in sharing with us from your manuscript and from your lyric essay. I'm so grateful to you and Louisa both. I would love to invite everyone to unmute so you can cheer for our incredible readers and applaud them. So I'm going to do that now.
Beautiful.
Don't spotlight me. Thank you so much. I'm speechless, honestly. Thank you both so much. This has been such an incredible night, and getting to hear your work together is so powerful. And thank you everyone in the audience, in the mosh pit, for coming. This event was recorded, and it's going to be captioned, and then it'll be up online on our website in a couple of weeks. And we'll, of course, promote it, and I'll share it with you both, Serena and Louisa. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have an incredible weekend. And
Thank
stay
you
safe
all for
out there.
coming. Thank you for organizing, Andrea and Poetry Project. And Louisa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You were amazing. And thank you so much, Andrea. This was like truly delightful. This is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.